Hey, what's up guys, and thank you for taking time out of your day to watch part 2 in my series of videos that I'm putting out this week, where I break down all the fights taking place at UFC on ESPN Plus 4 this weekend from a betting perspective. Now, I've already covered 3 fights this week, which you can check out in the link below. I'll leave a description to yesterday's video. And I'll be breaking down another 3 fights in today's video. Now, if you'd like me to do a bonus live stream video this Saturday, a few hours before the event starts, please hit the like button below. And if every video that I put out this week gets 50 likes, I will do that live stream where I answer all your questions about any of the fights taking place this weekend. And I'll also try and hunt for a decent value prop bet for every fight, so that hopefully you'll be able to make some cash this weekend. I will also do a much better job of scheduling this live stream in so you don't miss it in Friday's video, in part 4 of this series of videos. I'll let you know the exact time that I'm going to do the live stream. It'll probably be about 8 PM or 9 PM British time, with the event on Saturday night scheduled to start around 10 PM. It's probably best to do it a couple of hours before the event. So if you want that, guys, please hit the like button below and also subscribe to help the channel grow. Now let's get into the first fight that I want to talk about in today's video, which is going to be Marion Reneau against Kunitskaya. Now, straight away, this is a very tricky fight to cap, because this is one of those fights that has many different ways that it could play out. You know, I see a lot of people in MMA, you know, online, try and nail their flag to one fighter or another, and they really think when you're trying to predict the outcome of a fight, it's all about who is right and who is wrong. But fighting isn't like that at all, guys. Every fight has multiple different pathways that it can play out. You know, if someone thinks that Marion Reneau is going to win and she does win, it doesn't mean that they're right. And if someone thinks that Kunitskaya is going to win and she loses, it doesn't mean that they're wrong. If these girls fought 10 times, you know, you could see a completely different way that the fight would play out every time. And, you know, Yana might win 5 times and Reneau might win 5 times. As a professional gambler, and if you want to make money betting on MMA, instead of trying to think about who's right and who's wrong, because there really is no such thing, what you should be doing is researching a fight, trying to predict all the possible ways that the fight could play out, then try and identify the most likely way that it could play out, and then look at the odds to see if the risk is worth the reward, see if the payoff in the odds makes it worth betting on that particular outcome, determining how likely that outcome is, or determining, you know, how many different possible paths to victory each fighter has, and then trying to basically work out if they're worth a bet. So that kind of mindset is really important with a fight like this, where both girls are quite unpredictable, and there's really no way to predict how it's going to play out. If anyone tells you that they feel really strongly that either of these girls is going to win, you really have to call them out and ask them to back up their logic, because there's so many ways that this could go down. And the reason why I say that is because both girls have big weaknesses that their opponent could exploit. You know, if we look at Marion Reneau straight off the bat, in her last fight against Zingano, for whatever reason, she repeatedly threw herself to the ground. You know, there were times when she was jumping to the ground, she was pulling guard, she was giving up easy takedowns. Now, she's always had bad takedown defense, but for whatever reason, against Zingano, she just wanted to be on her back, which is obviously generally a bad idea in MMA. You know, unless you're Damian Maia or, you know, a jiu-jitsu phenom like Charles Oliveira, you do not want to be on your back. It's a losing position in MMA. So this showed some really bad fight IQ from Reneau. Now, that is a big weakness that Kunitskaya can exploit, because Kunitskaya has quite a heavy top game, so Reneau does not want to be on the bottom. And there are a few reasons why I think Reneau may have been willing to go to her back in her last fight against Zingano. The first reason being, she does have quite a lot of wins off her back. She does have quite high level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She's very offensive off her back. She does have slick submissions on her back, off her back. So the fact that she's picked up a few submission wins means that, you know, I think she could be looking for finishes and being too willing to go to her back because she's had success there before. Another reason could be because she's now 41 years old, and as we know, father time, it does catch up to everyone. At 41 years old, you know, realistically, how much longer can she compete against the best fighters in the world in the bantamweight division? We all get old, and there aren't many fighters past the age of 40 competing in the UFC for a reason. At the end of the day, our body declines and we just can't do what we used to be able to do. Also, Marion Reneau works a full-time job as a PE teacher, and as you know, it's very difficult to fully commit all the energy you have to one thing. You know, I'm a professional gambler. I literally sit at my desk for 7 to 8 hours a day researching fights. That's all I do. And if I wanted to commit to doing anything else, I wouldn't be able to put my full energy into it because there's not enough hours in the day. Also, Marion Reneau is a mother. You know, she has a young daughter. These are massive commitments, having a full-time job, being a pro MMA fighter and a mother. I have no idea how she juggles it all. So at this stage in her career, at 41 years old, is it all becoming a bit too much for her? And is that starting to weigh into her performances? Because like I say, her performance against Kat Zingano wasn't great. She showed very bad fight IQ when she kept repeatedly going to her back so easily. However, what I would say is that Yana also has quite a lot of weaknesses. The first weakness being that she just is not a comfortable striker. Her striking is very, very low level. She doesn't want to be exchanging with her opponents, and for that reason, I do give Reneau quite a significant advantage when it comes to striking. You know, if Reneau assesses her last performance, realizes that the reason she lost was because she was so willing to go to her back and give up top position, she tightens that up and chooses to really work hard to keep this fight standing. I've no doubt that she could outstrike Kunitskaya and beat Kunitskaya in a stand-up fight. And another one of Kunitskaya's weaknesses is, even though she's predominantly a grappler, she does really struggle to get her opponents to the ground. You will very rarely see her shoot single and double leg traditional wrestling takedowns. It does happen, but the majority of her takedowns come from trips and throws, which if Reneau really focused on shutting down, she should be able to, because Kunitskaya is not particularly great at getting to her opponents to the ground with trips and throws. You know, we saw in her last fight against Lena Landsberg. Landsberg's predominantly a Muay Thai based fighter, and Kunitskaya had to work really hard to get her down, and Landsberg obviously doesn't have the best takedown defense. So Kunitskaya, if Reneau came in, fought smart, I do think she could keep her standing, even though there's no doubt throughout her career her takedown defense has been poor. Another issue that I have with Kunitskaya is the majority of her takedowns come from judo throws. Now, Kunitskaya does not want to be in striking range. She's very uncomfortable when it comes to striking, so she likes to be inside on her opponent, working and battling in the clinch or on the ground. So when she's in the clinch, you'll often see her working for judo throws, and when she goes for judo throws and turns her hips into her opponent, you'll often see her giving her back up. It's something that she does very often. It's a huge hole in Kunitskaya's game. She hasn't been punished by anyone for it really yet. I mean, Tonya Evinger caught her in a rear naked choke, but I would not be surprised if, as her career moves forward, she doesn't tighten up that weakness. We could see Kunitskaya losing a lot more fights to rear naked choke, because she really telegraphs her judo throws and gives her back up a lot. And that's significant in this fight, because Marion Reneau has got very good back control, very, very slick submissions, nice high-level Brazilian jiu-jitsu. She can definitely punish Kunitskaya for giving up her back. So if we look at this fight from a betting perspective, I'm not interested in betting on Marion Reneau at this stage in her career. I mean, if we look at it, her odds currently are around about 2.50, giving her an implied probability of 40%. With her being 41 years old, with her potentially now making significant declines from fight to fight, you know, there were signs in a Zingano fight that she is just imploding at the moment and doing her best to lose, jump into the ground. I think that it's dangerous to bet on her at this stage in her career. It's not a smart play to bet on a 41-year-old with bad takedown defense against someone like Kunitskaya, who does have a heavy top game, who can, you know, wrap minutes of top control up on the clock and win rounds with top control. You know, even if she doesn't have the best takedowns and wrestling, it doesn't matter if Reneau's gifting takedowns to her on a plate by pulling guard and throwing herself to the ground like she did against Zingano. Kunitskaya can still cruise from top position. But at the same time, if we look at the odds on Kunitskaya, she's currently around about, call it an average of a 1.60 favourite, giving her an implied probability of 63%. I also don't think that she's a great bet, because, like I say, if Reneau does look at her last fight, realises she's second best when it comes to realizes that it's not going to work in her favor being on the bottom. She needs to stay in top position or keep the fight standing. If she tightens that up and looks to keep this fight standing, she can outstrike Kunitskaya. And also, another reason why I don't look like Kunitskaya in this fight is because under the new ABC judging scoring criteria that all judges should now be using in MMA, grappling exchanges are supposed to favour offense as opposed to control. So if we see Reneau attacking with a lot of submissions off her back, but Kunitskaya is in her guard from top position, not doing a lot, theoretically, under the new scoring, Reneau should win that grappling exchange, even though Kunitskaya is in top position. Now, what I would say about Kunitskaya is, even though she does have quite a heavy top game, she's very inactive from top position. She doesn't really threaten with that many submissions, doesn't really throw that much ground and pound either. So it's very possible Reneau could win the fight off her back. She is very active off her back. Obviously, it's unlikely because MMA judges are still not all following the new ABC rules that came into effect in January 2016, but they should be. So by the letter of the law, even off her back, Marion Reneau could win this fight. So that's something else to think about, and another reason why I don't like Kunitskaya as a favourite here. So I would recommend passing on that fight, guys. We now move on to the next one, which is going to be Jeff Hughes against Maurice Greene. Now, in yesterday's video, I did say that with Dan Moret, the majority of Moret's past fights have been in LFA and RFA, and it can be really difficult to find past footage from those promotions. So we have the same problem basically with Jeff Hughes. Jeff Hughes, the majority of his fights over the last couple of years have been in LFA, and unfortunately these fights are just not available online. But like I said with Dan Moret yesterday, guys, if you can find these fights available online, I would really appreciate you letting me know in the comments, because Jeff Hughes actually fought Maurice Greene just under a year ago in LFA 38, and I cannot find this fight online anywhere. I would love to watch this fight, but I just can't find this. So if you can find it, if you can find any of these fights over the last couple of years, please let me know. The only fights I've been able to watch from Jeff Hughes are against Josh Appelt on Dana White's Contender Series, but unfortunately that ended in round 1, so I didn't really get to learn a lot about him. And also this fight from back in 2016 against John Hawke. But Hughes didn't look very good in this fight against Hawke, but I don't want to be too critical of him because he is Stipe Miocic's direct training partner at Strong Style, and since this fight was 3 years ago, he's bound to have made significant improvements since then. So none of these fights, you know, before March 2016 really interest me. I'd really like to try and find these fights since, but unfortunately these 4 aren't available. Please let me know in the comments if you can find them, because like I said, Jeff Hughes has already beaten Maurice Greene just under a year ago, and it was by unanimous decision. So chances are Jeff Hughes could be an amazing fighter. An amazing bet here. We just don't know it. Now, from the 5 minutes I was able to observe of him against Josh Appelt, what I can say is he's not particularly dangerous standing. He's quite a stocky, compact, powerful guy, but not particularly fast, not particularly technical standing. He's definitely a wrestler, but because of his size, isn't really that explosive. His takedown entries are quite predictable, but obviously because he is 6'2" and 253 pounds, when he does get you down, he does have a very, very heavy top game, and he does have a reasonably good single leg. And I'm guessing he was able to beat Maurice Greene with wrestling, because as we saw on season 28 of The Ultimate Fighter, Maurice Greene's big weakness is his takedown defense. You know, when it comes to striking, Maurice Greene is very, very effective. Most guys, at 6'7" tall, you know, most guys that are abnormally, sorry, my phone's just gone off, guys. Most guys that are abnormally tall for their weight class tend to have bad takedown defense, and unfortunately, Maurice Greene also has that problem. At 6'7" and with an 82-inch reach, he is obviously a bit of a problem standing. One thing I really like about Maurice Greene is a lot of guys who are also abnormally tall for their division tend to be quite slow and cumbersome. You know, we think of Stefan Struve. His striking is really slow and sluggish, but Maurice Greene's actually very fast and very technical, and he's obviously got devastating knockout power. Maurice Greene is a nightmare standing, but obviously his takedown defense isn't great. But Jeff Hughes has obviously got to get inside on him to take him down, which is no picnic, because even on The Ultimate Fighter, Maurice Greene was making big improvements to his takedown defense. Now, what I would say about this fight is Maurice Greene is definitely unbettable for me, because if we look at his odds, currently around about 2.75, we don't really know that much about Jeff Hughes. Jeff Hughes has already beaten him less than a year ago, and even though Maurice Greene's likely to have made significant improvements competing on The Ultimate Fighter, how much could he really have improved in less than a year? So with Jeff Hughes winning by unanimous decision, probably not the smartest bet to bet on Greene here. Also, we have to remember that Jeff Hughes was originally supposed to fight Daniel Spitz on this card, so Maurice Greene is taking this fight on short notice. And another thing to remember is that Maurice Greene, he didn't display the best behaviours on season 28 of The Ultimate Fighter. If you go back and watch that season, you can see that he was a bit of a bully on the show. He did also drink quite a lot, and on one occasion he was caught smoking outside of the house. So it might not be the best lifestyle choices for a professional fighter. Maurice Greene might not be the best bet. I would recommend passing on him. And by the same token, if you were wiki capping this fight, you may think that Jeff Hughes could be a decent bet. After all, he did beat Greene less than a year ago, but I just cannot recommend a bet on. Sorry guys, I'm having all kinds of issues here. My TV's going to turn itself off. There we go. Sorry about that, guys. Very unprofessional of me today. I do apologise. I will try and do better in future. But yes, like I was just about to say, these 3 fights aren't available. Sorry, these 4 fights aren't available. I can't find them online. So Jeff Hughes, too much of a risk for me. I would also recommend passing on him. So into the next fight now, guys, we move on. And I do have 2 pages of research on this fight, but I am going to try and get through it as quickly as I possibly can. So Grant Dawson has had quite a lot of bad luck before he even has made his UFC debut. He appeared back in 2017 on Dana White's Contender Series. He beat Adrian Diaz by rear naked choke in round 2. But he's been out of action for 18 months because after his appearance on Dana White's Contender Series, he was actually flagged by USADA for an anti-doping violation. Now, this has now been dismissed and USADA have said there was no wrongdoing, but Dawson has posted here on his Instagram account that it was 14 months of investigation. So he's been out for 18 months, which at 25 years old, being sat on the shelf for that long isn't good. At this stage in your career, you need to be really active. You need to be learning new skills in the gym, putting them into practice in real competitive environments. And it's not good at all that he hasn't been able to be active within that time, and it's really, really unlucky. One thing I would say is, people say there's no smoke without fire. This case has been dismissed, but even if Dawson was taking some PEDs, remember, he was only 24 years old. He's a young guy. We've seen young guys before get caught taking PEDs and bounce back and it really not affect them and them to come back stronger. Remember, Brian Ortega was suspended by USADA and he's come back stronger than ever. But this case has been thrown out, so obviously can't throw any shade at Dawson. He's probably a clean fighter. He's probably a stupid tainted supplement, something like that. So Grant Dawson, an issue I have with him is that at 25 years old, you can see here, since he fought Mike Plazzola back in October 2016, which is like 2.5 years ago, he's only fought once, and that fight only lasted 7 or 8 minutes. So in the last 2.5 years, Grant Dawson has only got 7 or 8 minutes of real competitive experience, which isn't good for a young fighter. Remember, octagon jitters are a real thing. That's why a very high number of fighters that make their UFC debut actually lose. So already Grant Dawson has been put in a difficult position here by USADA, having been so inactive over the last few years. Octagon jitters are very likely to hit Dawson hard. And another thing we've got to think about is, he's only fought for 7 or 8 minutes in the last 2.5 years, and before that he's only been fighting in small promotions. At the end of the day, you've got to eat, you've got to pay rent, you've got to put food on the table. So how's he been making money? Fighting in promotions like Kansas City Fighting Alliance, Victory FC, Titan FC, they're not going to be paying that much money. would have earned $1,000 or $2,000 max for these fights. You know, Kansas City Fighting Alliance might have only been paying him a few $100s, and I don't know how much fighters get paid on Dana White's Contender Series, but fighters that come off the Ultimate Fighter into the UFC are only on 10,000 show, $10,000 win contracts. You know, I'm not on about the winners, I'm on about fighters like Montana De La Rosa, who didn't win the Ultimate Fighter, but they were given a contract afterwards. They're on very, very poor contracts. So even if Dawson got paid that for appearing on the Contender Series, it wouldn't be enough to last him. So he probably had to be working a full-time job as well as trying to prepare for making his UFC debut. And as we just mentioned with Marion Reneau, it's not easy to juggle to put all your energy and juggle two full-time things. So that also could have an impact on him. But this is his UFC debut, and I don't want to go too far back in Dawson's career and judge him on fights that took place a long time ago, but we can take a look at his fight from back in October 2016 against Mike Plazzola, just to gain some kind of idea of what we might get from Dawson on Saturday night. So if we start the fight off here, one thing that I noticed about Dawson straight away is that he's primarily a wrestler, but he's quite unathletic and quite slow. We can see he looks very low level striking, very nervous, very sloppy technique. And as you'll see in just a few moments when he shoots his first takedown attempt, because he shoots in so square and so telegraphed, he actually gets caught. He's just very slow, very sluggish, very cumbersome, which isn't good. And as you see him shoot in here, notice how he gets hurt on the way in, because he comes in so square and so predictable. His opponent's able to read it and catch him. Another thing, remember, he is a featherweight. Featherweight's supposed to be one of the fastest weight classes in the UFC, and Dawson, the way he moves, the way he carries himself, is just very, very slow. Also, Dawson is supposed to be a wrestler, but look at how easily Plazzola just manhandles him here, just throws him off like he's a boy. And he just, for me, Dawson looks unathletic and very physically weak. And also, another bad thing you're going to see here, Dawson's supposed to be a wrestler, and look at how bad his takedown defense is there. Plazzola just throwing him to the ground, manhandling him. Not a good sign at all, guys, for a wrestler. So then, if we just skip ahead a little bit, oh, actually, you're going to see here more of Dawson's bad takedown defense on show. Here you can see Plazzola literally just picks him up and throws him to the ground. Very, very poor. And another thing that we always talk about with defending takedowns is when, whoops, sorry guys, is when, oh, it's gone chaos, I do apologise. Today's video is messy. But what we always say about takedown defense, guys, is you should never let your shoulders go flat on the canvas. As soon as your opponent takes you down, you should immediately try and pop back to your feet. As soon as you give them time to establish top control in a dominant position, it makes it much harder for you to work your way back up to your feet and get back up. And that's one of the things you'll see alpha male guys do. Team alpha male fighters never let their shoulders go flat on the canvas, which is why they're so hard to hold down. They immediately pop back to their feet like a spring. But watch what Dawson does here. When Plazzola takes him down, watch in this moment here, his foot there is actually on the floor. Such a slow takedown. That's an opportunity for Dawson to explode out of that position and explode back to his feet. But instead, he just rolls to his back. Very, 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 very poor from a wrestler, to be honest with you. And then you see on the ground, just looks weak and a little bit clueless. So then, in a little while, we start to see Plazzola start to fish for a choke here, and while going for the choke, Plazzola actually makes a really bad mistake here, and you will see him pull guard, which gives top position to Dawson. So unless you've got a crazy squeeze like Pedro Munoz, I would never recommend doing something like this, but Plazzola makes a really, really bad mistake, goes to his back and gives up top position to Dawson. But from here, Dawson just doesn't really appear to have very strong top control. You can see he gives his opponent a lot of space to improve their position, and just a really weak top game. Here you can see as he postures up there, giving Plazzola quite a lot of space to improve his position. Plazzola doesn't take it. You know, there's just lots of space. There's lots of opportunities for Plazzola to get his feet on Dawson's hips and kick him off here. Here, Dawson again posturing up. Just loads of opportunities for Plazzola to actually improve his position, work his way back up. Again, loads of space here. Dawson, there that time, Plazola tries to kick off and get back to his feet, but in that time wasn't fast enough, and Dawson manages to get back into top position. But yeah, just a really weak top game, guys. Dawson giving his opponent tons of space. Again, while working for Mount here, tons of space enables Plazola to get the butterfly guard back in place, and just really, really sloppy top control from Dawson, and eventually gives him enough space to just stand back up. So Dawson, primarily a wrestler, but he looks physically weak, unathletic, poor takedown defense, and not the best top control. Not really good, to be honest with you. And that is pretty much all I want to show you from Dawson, guys. If you want to learn more about him, you can go watch this fight online. You could find it on YouTube. The only other thing that I could show you here is that Dawson shows that he also might have bad fight IQ here. Pulls guard on a guillotine attempt. Very, very poor fight IQ. Like I say, unless you're someone like Damian Maia or Pedro Munoz with a killer guillotine, you should never pull guard on a guillotine attempt, because you're giving up top position to your opponent. It's just a very, very bad idea. So Dawson, with a minute and a half left to go in this round, if Plazola gets his head free and ends this round with a couple minutes of top control, Dawson's probably going to lose this round. So very, very bad fight IQ for Dawson to do this. As it happens, when Plazola does manage to slip out of this guillotine attempt, which, you know, isn't really that tight, Dawson makes a nice transition into a triangle and gets a submission against a low level of opponent. But a more skilled grappler would have been able to shut that down. So Dawson, guys, based on his performance from back in 2016, not impressed at all, to be honest with you. And wasn't really impressed by his performance on the Contender Series against Adrian Diaz. But like I say, that fight was 2.5 years ago. Could have made significant improvements since then. We can't assume he's going to look like that. But if he does look anything like that, he's going to have a tough time in the UFC. Now, you'll probably remember Julian Erosa for having really bad takedown defense on season 22 of The Ultimate Fighter. That's pretty much what cost him on The Ultimate Fighter. He just couldn't keep a fight standing. But in this fight against Eric Sanchez, sorry, from back in November 2017, we can see that there are signs that his takedown defense is improving since being on The Ultimate Fighter, which you would expect, to be honest with you. You know, Erosa's 29 years old. He's still going to be making big improvements from fight to fight. And, you know, he's back. He was on The Ultimate Fighter 4 years ago now. So, obviously, he's going to have made improvements with takedown defense. And in this clip against Eric Sanchez, you can see a little bit of it here. Sanchez wastes no time. You know the strategy. You know the blueprint for beating Erosa. Try and take him down and grind him out on the ground. And you can see the strategy that Erosa uses straight away, showing signs of improvement. Goes to the overhook here on his left side. Very, very nice. And the overhook, you can see, gets it in place very nice and early here. There's the overhook. And the overhook, by controlling Sanchez's right arm, makes it difficult for Sanchez to duck down on a single or double leg takedown and complete the takedown. So very nice. Erosa in this position also doing a good job of creating a nice wide base against the cage. And these are skills that he didn't have on season 22 of The Ultimate Fighter. So showing big signs of improving his takedown defense. And we can also see here Sanchez working to connect his hands together and get a full body lock on Erosa. Here you see he's got his right hand or right arm around of Erosa, trying to connect his two hands together. And in a moment, you're going to see him get that full body lock. At the moment, you can see on the right side, Erosa's doing a really good job. You'll have to be quick to watch it because you can't see it for very long. But Erosa's using his right hand to fight hands with Sanchez here to prevent him from connecting his hands together and getting a full body lock. But eventually Sanchez gets it. But even here, Sanchez in a very strong position to complete this takedown with full control of Erosa's body, but he can't get it. Erosa shows really good balance, a strong core, maintains that wide base against the cage, and eventually manages to break Sanchez's grip. And Sanchez has to give up on the takedown attempt, and they're back in the center of the octagon. So these are skills that Erosa didn't have before. And with the footage we just saw of Dawson, with him looking very unathletic, not that explosive, you know, not really very strong from top position, or doesn't really look that strong of a wrestler, with that kind of takedown defense, there's a good chance that Erosa can keep this fight standing. But if we skip ahead a bit further on, I just want to show you the issues that I do have with Julian Erosa. So we have to skip on quite far into the fight to show you to around about here. So my main issues with Julian Erosa obviously is takedown defense, but there are signs that he's improving. And my other issues with him is that he fights with his hands very low. And because of that, his striking defense isn't the best. He does tend to get rocked or dropped quite a lot. Now, Dawson, obviously, that shouldn't be too much of an issue because Dawson, you know, doesn't look that dangerous standing at all. But at the same time, Erosa's not exactly rock solid standing. And another problem I have with Erosa is that he's quite a passive striker. Doesn't really throw that many strikes per round. And like I say, his striking defense not great there. You see him get caught with a left hand. Here you'll see him eat a left hand flush on the chin. In just a moment, if you get ready for it here, Sanchez lands a nice flush right hand on the chin. That's Erosa's problem. He gets rocked or dropped a lot because he fights with his hands low. Not good, guys. So both these guys have big weaknesses, obviously. Now, if we look at the odds on this fight, at the moment, Grant Dawson's currently around about a 1.59 favourite, giving him an implied probability of 63%. Based on the weaknesses we've just seen from him, there is no way that I would bet Dawson. He looks very average to me. Sloppy striking, low-level striking, unathletic, not strong, not particularly heavy top game, not a strong wrestler, which isn't good when you're primarily a grappler. And also, octagon jitters are a real thing. He's been out for 18 months, ring rest, octagon jitters, pressure of competing in a UFC debut. You know, there's just too many red flags with Dawson. He is unbettable. But if we look at the odds on Julian Erosa, currently around about a 2.50 underdog, giving him an implied probability of 40%. Now, that's not bad, to be honest with you. Erosa was a bet that I was considering here, guys. I was definitely considering betting on Erosa because I do think that there's mathematical value there. But remember, this is not a repeatable outcome that we can get our money back on. We're not flipping coins here. Julian Erosa will never fight Grant Dawson under the same circumstances after the same training camps in Wichita, Kansas, you know, with the same set of skills. This is a completely isolated event. And if you place a bet on Erosa at these odds and you lose, you never get an opportunity to get your money back. So there are some guys out there that just want to hunt for value in every fight and look for a mathematical edge and all this kind of stuff. But 99.9% of those guys have never made a penny from gambling. They're just recreational gamblers. They talk a good game, but they don't actually make cold hard cash, and they don't pay their mortgage every month and all their bills and support their family with gambling. Take it from someone that does. Take it from someone that does make a living doing this, that betting with this kind of mindset can get you into trouble. And we've just seen from Julian Erosa improvements to his takedown defense, but Dawson's been on the shelf for 18 months. This is UFC debut. We've seen him for 7 or 8 minutes in the last 2.5 years. You know, between the ages of 22 when he fought against Plazola to now, he could have made gigantic improvements. Could be a much stronger grappler now. We don't know. And we do know that Erosa has bad striking defense and he tends to eat a lot of clean, hard shots. He gets rocked and dropped a lot. So for all we know, Dawson could have made massive improvements to his striking. Erosa is just not the kind of fighter that I want to bet on. He's got too many holes. And we made a really good profit last week on Diego Sanchez. We absolutely crushed it last month. We made a massive profit last month betting guys like Thiago Alves, Shet Congo, Andre Fili, Montana De La Rosa, Lando Venata. Why put good money in harm's way? There will be much safer bets on this card and much safer bets next week. There's no need to gamble on this fight, so I recommend passing, guys. And I know that it's boring, but at the end of the day, being reckless doesn't pay the bills at the end of the month. If you watch these videos, chances are you want to make money. That's what I'm trying to help you do. So no bets on these 3 fights that I've covered today, guys, or I wouldn't recommend them, but I do think we'll have some bets in tomorrow's video. There are a couple guys I've already begun to start researching that I feel that I may pull the trigger on, so make sure you check out tomorrow's video. And don't forget, guys, that if this video and every other video that I put out this week gets 50 likes, I'll do that bonus live stream video on Saturday where I will look for prop bets on every single fight on the card, and I will also answer all your questions about this weekend's upcoming fights. So thanks a lot for the support, guys. Please hit the like button and subscribe to help the channel grow. Have a great night, and I will see you tomorrow.
Too many thoughts on my mind, I can't sleep at night, so I just keep writing. I don't need no help, I don't need opinions, so don't waste my time then. I just been living online, my city don't show me no loving, that's fine. Fuck local radio stations, I got more plays than all of these rappers combined. I'm going again, I've been going in, I'm fed up with so many things, I gotta just let it all out. I'm talking about the shit they've been talking.